Use the graph on the right to answer the following questions. Estimate the pressure at altitudes of 9,000 feet, 12,000 feet, and 29,000 feet. Part B, estimate the altitudes at which the pressure is 24, 17, and 12 inches of mercury. C, estimating beyond the boundaries of the graph, at what altitude do you think the atmospheric pressure reaches 5 inches of mercury? Is there an altitude at which the pressure is exactly zero? Explain your reasoning. Alright, we'll start with part A, right here. And we're going to estimate the pressures at altitudes of 9,000 feet, 12,000 feet, and 29,000 feet. So we're going to go back to the graph and we're going to look for where we approximately find 9,000 feet, which is going to be somewhere right around here. And then what we want to do is draw a line so that we intersect the graph, and that is a vertical line. And then what we're going to do is draw a horizontal line back to the y-axis. And then we're going to estimate, because it falls somewhere between 20 and 25. It's kind of in the middle. So for 9,000 feet, we're going to assume that the pressure is at 23 inches of mercury. And then we're going to look at 12,000 feet. And we may not be able to find it exactly on the graph, but we can approximate. There's 15,000 feet right there. 12,000 is going to be closer to 10 than it would be to 15, so we will draw a vertical line up to the graph. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate. And then we're going to come back over to the graph, and it's going to be somewhere around 20 or 21, but we'll assume it's 21. So that's 12,000 feet will correspond to 21 inches of mercury. And then finally we're going to look at 29,000 feet. So where's 29,000 feet on the graph? It's right about here. We draw our vertical line straight up to the graph, and then we come straight over here, and we're going to estimate that to be roughly 10 inches of mercury. So 29,000 feet will correspond to a pressure of 10 inches of mercury. Then we're going to look at part B. We want to estimate the altitudes at which the pressure is 24, 17, and 12 inches of mercury. So when we go ahead to start that one, we'll look on the vertical axis and we'll find 24, which is somewhere right about here. Okay, and since this is getting crowded, what I'm going to do is I will erase all of these dotted lines and we'll start fresh. So we're at 24, which is going to be somewhere right around here. And if that's the case, then we want to go ahead and draw a horizontal line until it intersects the graph, and then we want to go ahead and draw a vertical line down, and that's going to be roughly, we can estimate that to be somewhere around 8,000 or 9,000 feet. It's an approximation. So at 24 inches of mercury, we'll say roughly 8,000 feet. But there's a little bit of leeway in there, and you could have answered anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 depending on how you drew your line. The next one after 24 is going to be 17. So we're looking at a pressure of 17 inches of mercury, and we want to know what that corresponds to for an altitude. So we'll come up the vertical axis again. There's 15, 16, right about here for 17, and then we're going to draw horizontal line over until we hit the axis, and then we're going to go ahead and draw a vertical line down to the x-axis. Now you'll notice that the line that I drew corresponds to the point 20,000, 16. So I'm going to indicate that it's 20,000 feet. And of course, once again, it's an estimation, so something between 17 and 20,000 feet would work for this. And then finally, we're going to consider 12 inches of mercury. And we want to know at what altitude we would see a pressure of 12 inches of mercury. So vertical axis, there's 10, 11, 12 is going to be somewhere here. So we draw a horizontal line back to the graph, and then we're going to draw a vertical line down so that it intersects the x-axis, and then we're going to make an estimate. And that looks a little bit to the right of 26,000 or 25,000, I should say, so I'm going to call it 26,000 feet. And of course, once again, there's going to be a range of values anywhere from, say, 24,000 to 28,000 because it is an estimate. Then finally, we're going to look at part C, which says estimating beyond the boundaries of the graph, at what altitude do you think the atmospheric pressure reaches 5 inches of mercury? Is there an altitude at which the pressure is exactly zero? Explain your reasoning. So part C says estimating the boundaries beyond the boundaries of the graph, at what altitude do you think the atmospheric pressure reaches 5 inches of mercury? Well, even though I just repeated that, we're going to go ahead and kind of extrapolate. We're going to draw a line down until we access this cross line of 5. We'll stop, and now we're going to explain or examine where we think that falls, and that's not quite 40,000. It's a little more than 35,000. So for part C, I would go ahead and put down that the approximation is roughly 36,000. So approximately and then the last part, is there an altitude at which the pressure is exactly zero? Well, the pressure is going to approach zero. Now the last part, is there an altitude at which the pressure is exactly zero? Explain your reasoning. Well, let's go ahead and clear this graph again so we can get rid of all of these lines. And then we'll go ahead and look at the actual graph itself. And you got to understand that these are all going to be approximations. But this particular graph seems to be going straight down, but you'll notice that there's a slight curve right here and here, and it would be a good assumption to think that this eventually will continue to go down but never quite reach zero. It will approach zero and get maybe very, very close, but there's still, as long as you are in the atmosphere of the planet, going to be a little bit of pressure. So your next answer would be the pressure approaches zero but does not quite reach it.